I just got done with watching the last Indiana Jones movie, The Last Crusade, and yes, what can I say? Very satisfied. Really happy with this one. I actually think this one was the best one, out of all of the ones that came before. And I say that in a very, not in so much as it's so up there compared to the other ones, but I think it's a really, for some reason, for me, it feels like a sort of a leap forward, I think, and it kind of does more, I think, than the other movies did. And for some reason, I just come out of it just so satisfied. Unbelievably satisfied. I was really happy with the third one. The third one I think actually got, from the websites that I looked at, it seemed to be the highest one, and have the highest rating. So for the most part, yeah, it's just up there, and there are several reasons I think for that. And I'll sort of go down the list for you. But let me first try to explain a little bit of the plot here. And for those of you who don't know, basically The Last Crusade is sort of a hint there, if you know your history, that they're going to be talking about the Holy Grail. Oh yes, the Holy Grail, that cup, that is very important, is a very important symbol for Christianity, and was protected many yarns ago, and there's been many legends and different interpretations of the Grail, but the way this movie decides to take it is sort of the idea of it being something that you could drink out of that will give you immortality. That's basically the sort of supernatural aspect of this particular artifact that Indiana Jones is trying to find. But basically, the plot sort of opens up again with sort of other adventures. So you'll kind of, and it's funny because you'll actually see Indiana Jones as a kid at the way beginning, and then you'll see another adventure that he took that was a little bit more current, and then you get into finally sort of the big plot here of finding the Holy Grail. So for the most part, what I can say is that as far as plot-wise, without really spoiling too much, because again, I think this movie, it's hard for me to sort of explain the plot without spoiling it for you, but just kind of know going in that yes, Sean Connery's in this movie, and yes, he plays Indiana Jones's dad, Professor Henry Jones Sr., and he is a lot of fun, but he plays a really significant role here because the reason and how Indiana Jones sort of gets involved with the search for the Holy Grail is by his dad going missing, and as he goes and tries to find his dad, because his dad was trying to do research into finding the Grail, because he's also a history sort of buff as well. I think they mentioned that he teaches, Indiana Jones mentions at one point that he teaches Middle Ages history. So again, they're sort of on the same playing field when it comes to their career choices, but for the most part, without trying to give too much away, I just want to say that all you kind of need to know is that it's part of the starting of this plot is Indiana Jones finding his dad, and once he finds his dad, it sort of everything starts to get a little bit more epic, and things start to happen, and twists and turns go along the way, and pretty much that's how the plot tries to set up itself. And the villains in this movie, who, again, sort of similar to the previous Indiana Jones movies, who also want to get the special artifact, are again the Nazis. Sort of from the first movie, except this time there's sort of two main villains going on that come into play, and they're played by Alison Doody and Julian Glover. And for the most part, they do a decent job in carrying the plot. But I don't really want to give too much away about the villains. But the villains I don't really think are so interesting. But there are sort of some twists and turns as to how the villains come out and present themselves. And I really don't really want to give that away. What I can say is, not only do we get these villains and Sean Connery, Indiana Jones' dad, but we also get some characters that were from the first film. One character is by the name of Marcus Brody, who's played by Denholm Elliott, and I think he's given more of a presence in this film. In the first film, he's kind of there just to give sort of like exposition, and then sort of leave. But in this movie, he kind of plays more of a role, and I really like that. I like that they tried to bring in a previous character and give him a little bit more presence. And I think he does sort of have a presence on screen, even though it's not maybe so prominent. And another character that appears again is Sala, who was in the first movie as well, played by John Rhys Davis. And he's given a little bit more too. I think a little bit more than the first movie, but maybe not as much. He's just kind of the same character trying to help Indiana Jones get to wherever he needs to go, and assisting him and being that sort of guide, I guess you could say. But for the most part, he's not really so prominent. But I think it was interesting that they tried to incorporate some characters from the previous film, and I think it worked here. I think it really did work. So what makes this movie so great, you might say? Let me just say, Sean Connery and Harrison Ford's chemistry. I mean, these two, this pair is just, they're just fun to watch. It's a very relatable relationship. I think, especially with the bond between a father and a son, and I guess they haven't really been sort of in contact so much, and having them now go on this kind of adventure, and kind of reconnecting, I thought was really nice. And it's probably the best relationship out of all the characters that Indiana Jones has encountered. His relationship with his dad was really, I think, the best. Second being with the kid. But first, I would definitely have to give it to Sean Connery and Harrison Ford, because together they're just a lot of fun. They're just a lot of fun to watch. They're very engaging and very relatable, and just great father and son. You kind of see their differences, and how his dad is maybe sometimes wanting to do what he thinks is right, and Indiana Jones thinks that's not practical. You'll see certain situations where they do kind of butt heads, and it's interesting. It's fun to watch. Probably best relationship, definitely, because it makes the film really more prominent. What else is interesting about this movie? It has tons and tons and tons of tons of adventure action. Chases, underground passageways, a lot of mystery, and a lot of stuff just keeps happening. I think in the other films it sort of had things going on, but kind of kept it sort of still at points where things would just be happening within like one area. But in this movie, it kind of goes from like one place to the next. I mean, there's like tons of chase scenes in this movie. I mean, I literally thought I was kind of watching more of of a James Bond movie than actually watching an Indiana Jones movie, because there's a boat race at one point, sort of towards the beginning. There's stuff blowing up. There's a plane chase. There's a lot of hand-to-hand combat. There are tanks. There's just a lot of stuff being thrown at you, and it's very, very engaging, and very, very fun to watch for the most part. Just really, really, really good. And the way in how Indiana Jones and his father carry on this sort of journey that they're on is just, I found to just be a lot of fun. And it seems, I thought this one was actually the most funniest, actually, out of all the Indiana Jones movies. And I'm not saying that this is going to be like completely, utterly hilarious. It's not, at least in my opinion, but I think it's very fun. And I think the comedy works more than the comedy that they tried to do in the previous films. I felt that it was just very engaging and quick, and you know, it would just be like, next, moving on to now this, and just a lot of fun. I think that's really what makes this movie work. It's just that there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of places that they go, and you do kind of get a real sense of what an adventure movie should be. And I think it was just really well done on both Harrison Ford and Sean Connery's part. The only thing that I could really say as to something that I guess maybe didn't really work was maybe just the villains. I mean, the villains, they're kind of, they're not necessarily, I think, as memorable. I think the first film still has the best villain, because they gave them more dialogue, or they gave him more dialogue. They just made him, I guess, a little bit more engaging. And I felt like the engagement between him and Indy was more spot on than in this film. Except for one of the villains, the girl villain, who is again played by Alison Doody. I have to say, it is interesting, like the sort of relationship that she has with Indy, but it's a little bit, I don't know, it's hard to say, because I don't really understand her. I didn't really get from the film and really understanding of like her motivations, and then like her kind of, I think, you know, they make her set up like she's really smart, and she's very sort of independent, and very ambitious, but at the same time it's almost like she takes a turn for the crazy towards the end. And I don't know, it just seemed a little maybe out of place, like that she would be willing to do what she did, and or like really take the risks that she took. And you'll kind of see what I'm talking about once it goes to sort of the very end of the film. You'll kind of understand, at least. I guess you could say it's one of those things where she does have a presence on screen. She is engaging as the villain, but she's not really that, I think, interesting. I don't think her motivations are that interesting. I think I've seen these motivations before, and by villains in other movies. It's nothing really new. I mean, I think we've seen this before, and I don't know. I just didn't think that she was. I mean, she's engaging, but she's not. There's nothing really behind anything of her motivations, I think. I mean, at times she's all sympathetic, and then suddenly towards the end she suddenly, and then at points you'll see how she has sort of sympathy with Indiana Jones, and then you're not even really sure if if or why all of a sudden she has that sympathy. It's kind of obscure, I think. I don't think she had I didn't really get a sense of what she was, who she really was, and what she was trying to really do. I didn't really see a lot of that happening from her part. So, for the most part, I think the best villain was probably in the first movie, because his motivations are clear, and you can tell through sort of his passion for it, and how he kind of he sees it as beyond something. I guess the object that they're chasing, he sees it as something beyond us being just a material thing. And I think the villains here, they just see it as something to gain for themselves, rather than the first villain, who I felt was doing it for more higher purposes. And I guess that's, I mean, I may be nitpicking it here, but I think that's really something that I just thought to myself, like, yeah, I mean, the villains, I mean, I think it was better than the villains were better than the second one, because at least they kind of seemed a little bit more human, or just had more screen time. But for the most part, I don't know, I felt like that they just were in this for more of their selfish motivations, excuse me, instead of trying to achieve for something higher, unlike in the first film. So I think that's why they kind of didn't remain as interesting to me. They're engaging for the most part, but they're just not so. I just, you know, when something happens to them, I don't really sympathize with them or really care about them. And I don't know if we're really supposed to. I don't know if that was what Spielberg was going for, but again, I think really the villains is really the only aspect that I can say that that maybe just fell a little bit flat, but everything else is just really well done. I mean, and I think for the most part, Sean Connery's character, Henry Jones Sr., Professor, is very fun and very likable. And Indiana Jones himself is, again, very likable. And for the most part, I I really enjoyed it. I think even the nostalgia critics said that The Last Crusade was, or Indiana Jones' Last Crusade, was his favorite Spielberg film. I personally don't think it's Spielberg's best film. I don't think I could really categorize it as that. I don't think it's doing anything really necessarily new, but it's doing it well. And I think I really do get a deeper sense of Indiana Jones's character a bit. Kind of like in the second one as well. And you kind of do see him not necessarily maybe grow, but you do see him sort of understand his father better, and how their relationship becomes more prominent to the audience as the movie goes on. But yeah, it's basically Indiana Jones and Junior and Senior together, the two Joneses, and they really do carry this film. They do make this film fun, and everything that's happening to them makes it even more fun. So when you do that, it just works. And I think that's why it's probably the best. I really do think this is the best Indiana Jones film. But again, I don't put it at such that it's so higher than all the other ones. I think the other ones do also a very good job at doing what they need to do and trying to tell the story and trying to have action and characters and things like that. I think they do it really well. It's just I think this one was just kind of took the cake for me personally. It was something that resonated with me the most, and is probably the one that I'll remember the most. Again, I guess you could say it just depends on the person. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there who probably maybe like one of the earlier ones better. But for me, I really felt that this one really captured what Indiana Jones is supposed to be. And captured in a way where it works. I guess you could say that's what I think is very important, and I think you need characters to carry an adventure film, and you need sort of character bonds and interactions, similar with something like Lord of the Rings, where Frodo and Sam really do have this really deep bond. But they quarrel at times, and they're different. Similar with Sean Connery and Harrison Ford. The way that they act towards each other shows their differences. But I think that's what adventure movies should do. They should provide you with characters that interact and are going through a process together. I think that's the whole point. And I think it's done really, really well, really, really effectively here. Really enjoy it, really find it very engaging. But for the most part, I have to say it is probably the best one out of the three. But again, everybody else probably has a different opinion on that. And I really think that's all I can really say on this film. It was just a blast to watch. It was a lot of fun, very engaging, starts off engaging, and it knows how to carry itself. I was never at one point bored watching it. I think the other two films, there were times where maybe I would just be a little bit sucked out of it at times, but I still was really engaged. But this one kept me engaged throughout the entire thing. I think that's really what an Indiana Jones movie should do, and I think The Last Crusade really accomplished that. I think it's probably the best one, but they're still on sort of the same level as far as story, as far as characters and things like that. But I think this one just does it the most effectively. But again, I think anybody else could have a totally different opinion from me. But definitely worth checking out if you're interested in history, adventure. If you've not seen any of the Indiana Jones movies, I encourage you to maybe start from the beginning, because again, you do have those little characters that get incorporated again, and then it kind of allows you to see like what Spielberg does, because you kind of see how he tries to kind of keep this series consistent, but at the same time trying to make it a little bit different at times. But yeah, it's a really fun film, very engaging, and having the Nazis as villains again, don't mind. They've got tons and tons of weapons and stuff at their disposal, and they use them in this movie, and they use them a lot. So having them as the villains again, I don't think is somehow not ineffective, because I think you can do a lot with these villains, because they do have a lot of technology at their disposal, especially for the time period that Indiana Jones movies take place. But I think that's really all I can say. Any questions, comments, concerns, I'm more than happy to answer them. And until next time,